Gentlemen, we have a phantom in the Atlantic. It sees in the dark, and it kills in silence. In the bleak spring of 1943, Captain Lieutenant Erich Voss, a seasoned U-boat commander, surfaced his vessel in the mid-Atlantic night. He had a vital position report for BDU headquarters in occupied Paris, standard yet always dangerous procedure. His radio operator compressed the message into a rapid Morse burst. 20 seconds of crackling transmission, then immediate silence. The commander felt a chilling certainty of safety. German naval intelligence had, for years, assured U-boat crews that such short-burst signals were untraceable. Direction, finding equipment, they insisted, required ample time, at least a minute, to secure an accurate bearing. Yet, less than an hour later, a Royal Navy destroyer, a ghostly shape in the darkness, appeared on the horizon, racing at full speed, heading directly for his exact position. The U-boat crash-dived, but too late. Depth charges hammered the pressure hull, and the submarine began its final descent. Voss would never know how the enemy had found him so quickly. The true weapon that decimated U-boats like his was not a revolutionary new torpedo, nor a complex sonar system. It was a deceptively simple, remarkably inexpensive radio receiver that could be installed on any ship in under an hour. The British called it HF-DF, high-frequency direction, finding. Allied sailors, with dark, efficient humor, shortened it to Huff-Duff. It single-handedly turned the tide of the Battle of the Atlantic. In 1942, Gross Admiral Dönitz's U-boats were winning the war. His fleet was, quite literally, strangling Great Britain. In November 1942 alone, U-boats attacked 142 merchant ships, damaging or destroying over 700,000 tons of vital shipping. The mathematics were horrifying. Britain required millions of tons of imports annually, and at current loss rates, the island faced potential starvation by mid-1943. Winston Churchill later confessed that the only thing that truly terrified him during the entire war was the U-boat peril, not the relentless Blitz, not the fall of France, the submarines. The fundamental, agonizing problem was detection. The North Atlantic encompasses 41 million square miles, and a surfaced U-boat presented a profile barely 3 feet above the waterline. Locating one in the fog or darkness was like finding a specific pebble on a vast beach. Early radar helped, but its range was limited, and U-boats quickly learned to dive the instant they detected its telltale pulses. Sonar was only useful if you knew approximately where to look, and U-boats spent most of their operational time on the surface, where sonar was useless. But the U-boat had a fatal tactical weakness. Dönitz's entire Wolfpack strategy was dependent on real-time radio contact. Submarines had to report convoy sightings so that other boats could converge for devastating, coordinated attacks. Individual commanders needed to transmit fuel status, weather reports, and position updates. Standing orders mandated that U-boats transmit at least once every 3 days. Every transmission was a vulnerability. Dönitz knew this, but he placed absolute misguided faith in German radio security. Operators used meticulously designed procedures. Messages were encoded using the complex Enigma machines, creating what German cryptographers deemed unbreakable encryption. The transmissions themselves were compressed into rapid Morse bursts, typically lasting 20 seconds. Frequencies were changed frequently, and transmission only occurred when absolutely necessary. German naval intelligence's catastrophic assessment was that Allied direction-finding equipment required a full minute of continuous transmission to achieve an accurate bearing. A 20-second burst, therefore, was deemed inherently safe. This assessment was tragically and fundamentally wrong. The technology to pinpoint brief radio transmissions had been perfected by British scientists at the Telecommunications Research Establishment as early as 1940. They developed a simple, rotating loop antenna system that could determine a signal's direction in mere seconds. The breakthrough lay in automation and simplicity. Earlier, DF systems used complex goniometers, requiring trained operators to manually calculate bearings. The new HF-DF system automated the process entirely. A motor continuously spun a loop antenna. An incoming signal would drop to a minimum strength when the antenna was perpendicular to it, a null point. An oscilloscope displayed this null visually. The operator simply read the bearing off a calibrated dial. Total time from signal detection to bearing determination: 3 to 5 seconds. The device was compact and lightweight, easily mounted on any vessel larger than a corvette, and its installation required no modification to the ship's existing radio equipment. The HF-DF receiver operated independently, continuously listening on U-boat frequencies. It worked in any weather, didn't interfere with the ship's other communications, and was remarkably inexpensive to manufacture compared to other anti-submarine weapons. The Admiralty began equipping convoy escorts with HF-DF sets in late 1941. By early 1942, dozens of destroyers and corvettes carried the equipment. By the end of 1942, well over 100. By early 1943, Huff-Duff was rapidly becoming standard issue across the entire escort fleet. The equipment spread faster than any other anti-submarine technology of the war, faster than improved radar, faster than the Hedgehog mortar. Commanders who witnessed its effectiveness demanded it immediately. The tactical advantage was immediate and devastating. When a U-boat transmitted, every HF-DF-equipped ship within 12 to 14 miles instantly received a bearing via ground wave signals. These short-range detections were the most valuable, indicating a dangerously close submarine. If two ships received the signal, their intersecting bearings pinpointed the U-boat's exact position. If three or more detected it, triangulation produced a tactical fix, accurate to within 1 mile. From a dozen miles away, based on a 20-second radio burst, the U-boat's precise location was plotted on the escort commander's chart before the German radio operator had even lifted his Morse key. Commander Alistair Finch, commanding Escort Group B7, detailed the system's lethal effectiveness during the legendary convoy ONS 5 Inches, May 1943. His report: at 0142 hours, HF-DF contact bearing 310 degrees, strength 4. Estimated range 25 miles. Altered course to intercept. At 0227, radar contact at 11,000 yards. U-boat dived, attacked with depth charges. Heavy oil and debris surfaced. Assessment: U-boat destroyed. Total time from HF-DF detection to attack: 45 minutes. The U-boat never had a chance. It never knew what had betrayed its position. The technology created a tactical revolution. Before Huff-Duff, escorts operated reactively, searching, responding to vague sightings, or investigating suspicious radar contacts. They had no way to actively hunt U-boats across the vast open ocean. Huff-Duff changed the geometry of the battle. Now, every U-boat radio transmission became a beacon the hunter had become the hunted. Escort commanders developed brutally aggressive new tactics. When HF-DF detected a U-boat transmission ahead of the convoy, a destroyer would race toward the bearing at top speed. The primary goal wasn't necessarily to sink the submarine, but to force it to dive. A submerged U-boat could only manage 7 knots maximum. It could not possibly keep pace with a convoy making 8 or 9 knots, and it certainly couldn't attack from ahead if it was pinned down 20 meters below the surface. Captain Frederick Walker, commander of the legendary 2nd Support Group, refined this technique to devastating effect. His ships relentlessly pursued every HF-DF contact, forcing U-boats to remain submerged for hours. The submarines burned through their battery power, lost all contact with the convoy, and never reached a firing position. The statistics tell a stark, unblinking story. In March 1943, U-boats attacked 108 merchant ships worldwide in convoy operations. In April, losses dropped. In May, they plummeted further. But May 1943 943 saw something unprecedented. The Germans lost 41 U-boats. 41 submarines in a single month, more than were lost in the entirety of 1,940. On May 24, 1943, Admiral Dönitz made the most agonizing decision of his career. He withdrew all U-boats from the North Atlantic. For the first time since 1939, the U-boat fleet admitted defeat. Dönitz was mystified. He knew the Allies had improved their anti-submarine capabilities, more escort carriers, better radar, larger escort groups. But the speed and precision of the Allied responses suggested something more. U-boats were being intercepted too quickly. Destroyers appeared, seemingly out of thin air, racing directly toward submarines that had just transmitted brief status reports. The accuracy was uncanny. German naval intelligence desperately scrambled for explanations. The first theory was that Enigma had been compromised. But cryptographic analysis showed no evidence of Allied code breaking. And test transmissions with false information produced no corresponding Allied reaction. Enigma, they erroneously concluded, remained secure. The second theory blamed spies who were supposedly reporting departure times and patrol areas from U-boat bases. The Abwehr launched massive counterintelligence investigations but found nothing. The third theory focused on advanced radar, specifically the British asymmetric sets that could detect U-boats at greater ranges than German warning receivers could detect the radar pulses. This was partially true, but it failed to explain how Allied ships could respond so precisely to radio transmissions. German technical intelligence was aware of direction-finding technology, but they fundamentally underestimated how fast and accurate Allied shipborne DF had become. They believed accurate direction finding required huge, complex, shore-based antenna arrays. The idea that individual escort vessels carried compact, automated DF equipment capable of instant bearings seemed simply beyond Allied capabilities. German assessments were built on the premise that 1 minute was needed to determine an accurate bearing. A 20-second burst should have been safe. The Allied HF, DF, could get a bearing in 3 to 5 seconds. This catastrophic failure to grasp Allied HF, DF capabilities cost Germany the Battle of the Atlantic. The German Navy wasted enormous resources on countermeasures that entirely missed the actual threat. They developed radar-absorbent coatings for U-boats. They experimented with snorkel systems, all valuable innovations, but none addressed the fundamental vulnerability. Every radio transmission was a death sentence. U-boat commanders developed their own desperate theories. Experienced aces noticed that Allied ships seemed to locate them immediately after a radio burst. Some recommended maintaining absolute radio silence for weeks. Others suggested transmitting only when deeply submerged, hoping the water would mask the signal's direction, a technique that only succeeded in making BDU's coordination impossible. Some captains simply stopped following radio procedures, maintaining complete silence. Dönitz was furious. His entire tactical system collapsed without real-time intelligence. He issued strict orders: maintain radio discipline, report positions as directed, trust in German engineering and security procedures. The orders condemned hundreds of submariners to death. The human cost was staggering. U-boat losses climbed relentlessly throughout 1,943 and 1,944. The probability of surviving a patrol plummeted. Of the approximately 40,000 men who served in U-boats during the war, some 28,000 died, a 70% fatality rate, the highest of any military service in any nation during World War II. Allied intelligence knew from the ultra-decrypts that the Germans never truly understood Huff-Duff's effectiveness. Bletchley Park intercepted German naval intelligence reports which mentioned direction finding as just one factor among many, but German analysts consistently underestimated its accuracy. British commanders were ordered to maintain the deception. When HF-DF secured a U-boat fix, escorts would often delay their response by 20 or 30 minutes, approaching on indirect courses to suggest they'd found the submarine via radar or visual search. The goal was to prevent the Germans from connecting the lethal reality of their radio transmissions with the immediate Allied response. The secrecy worked. Post-war interrogations confirmed that even the most experienced surviving U-boat commanders never fully understood how the Allies located them so consistently. They blamed air patrols, improved radar, and Allied numerical superiority. Some believed elaborate conspiracy theories. The simple truth, a cheap direction finding receiver on hundreds of escorts made their radio communication suicidal, eluded them entirely. The technology itself was elegantly simple. The rotating antenna was just copper wire on a frame. The receiver used standard vacuum tube technology. The oscilloscope was adapted from existing test equipment. No component was revolutionary. The innovation was integration. Combining existing unclassified technologies into a mass-producible system that could be easily installed and operated by sailors with minimal training. American manufacturers joined production in 1943, and by 1944, hundreds of Allied warships carried operational Huff-Duff. A U-boat operating anywhere in the Atlantic was effectively broadcasting its position to anyone listening. The strategic implications extended beyond the Atlantic. HF-DF principles were used to detect Japanese radio traffic in the Pacific and German tank radio communications in France. The fundamental lesson was universal. In modern warfare, communications were simultaneously essential and supremely vulnerable. An enemy who could intercept and locate radio transmissions held an asymmetric advantage that tactical skill couldn't overcome. Senior Allied commanders recognized after the war that HF-DF was one of the most decisive anti-submarine technologies of the entire campaign, as tactically important as the breaking of the Enigma codes. While Ultra provided strategic intelligence with a delay, Huff-Duff gave tactical commanders immediate, actionable intelligence at the precise moment of battle. The technology remained classified for years. The British government maintained strict secrecy about its effectiveness, removing the equipment from vessels before they were sold, and destroying technical manuals. This protected Ultra secrets by providing an alternative explanation for the uncanny Allied interceptions. When the records were finally declassified, historians realized the tactical turning point came earlier than previously believed. And for simpler reasons. The U-boat force was defeated by the systematic exploitation of a vulnerability they never recognized. Admiral Dönitz lived until 1980. In his memoirs, he attributed U-boat losses primarily to Allied air power and the closure of the mid-Atlantic air gap. He mentioned direction finding only in passing. Even 35 years after the war, the architect of the U-boat campaign never fully grasped how completely Huff-Duff had compromised his entire radio tactical system. The mathematical reality was stark and brutal. A U-boat transmitting twice daily gave Allied escorts at least 2 opportunities to detect, locate, and attack it. Across a 60-day patrol, that meant 120 transmission events. If each transmission had even a 2% chance of leading to an attack, the submarine's probability of surviving the patrol was less than 10%. Dönitz's insistence on regular radio communications transformed U-boat operations into a statistical death sentence. German submariners were extraordinarily brave, but courage couldn't overcome mathematics. The industrial comparison is a final, cruel irony. Germany built over 1,150 U-boats. Each Type 7 submarine cost millions of Reichsmarks, and the total U-boat program consumed billions in resources. Britain produced HF-DF equipment at a fraction of the cost. The cost ratio was thousands to 1. This was not just an Allied victory. It was an asymmetric triumph of simple, effective technology over expensive, complex systems. The U-boat represented German engineering at its finest. Pressure-resistant hulls, advanced diesel engines. Each submarine was a mechanical masterpiece. Huff-Duff was a rotating antenna, a radio receiver, and an oscilloscope components you could buy at a commercial electronics shop. The lesson transcended World War II. Military planners learned that communication security could not be achieved through encryption alone. An encrypted message still reveals the sender's location. Radio silence became a tactical consideration as important as message content. Modern submarine forces operate under strict emissions control, limiting all radio traffic to bursts measured in milliseconds. The principles discovered in the Atlantic between 1941 and 1945 remain operational doctrine today. The deepest lesson, perhaps, was about assumption. The German Navy assumed their procedures were adequate because their technical analysis, based on obsolete 1940 technology, said 20-second transmissions were untraceable. They captured actual HF, DF equipment. They read U-boat commanders' reports, describing suspiciously accurate Allied responses. Yet, institutional inertia and confirmation bias prevented them from connecting the pieces. Accepting the truth would have required acknowledging that their entire tactical system was fundamentally compromised. That admission was too painful. Cognitive bias killed thousands of German sailors. The simple technical solution was radio silence. If U-boats had operated independently, without coordinated wolfpack tactics, Huff-Duff would have been far less effective. But Dönitz's doctrine demanded coordination. Coordination required communication. Communication meant transmission, and transmission meant death. The final irony: the technology wasn't even secret. Direction-finding principles were published before the war. German engineers knew the theory but focused on sophisticated alternatives. Better encryption, frequency hopping. They never built the compact, automated systems for shipborne use. British engineers succeeded because they focused on the essential, practical problem: how to find the submarines quickly enough to attack them. The solution required no theoretical breakthroughs, only robust, cheap, easily operated engineering. Huff-Duff met all these criteria, and it won the Battle of the Atlantic. By May 1945, the U-boat threat was eliminated. German submarines still operated, but only in isolated, desperate efforts. The starvation blockade that had seemed inevitable in early 1943 never materialized. The technology that prevented that catastrophe was remarkably simple and inexpensive. Compact enough to fit on any escort, simple enough to install in an afternoon. And the Germans never fully countered it, never understood its capabilities. Sometimes, wars are won not by the largest guns or the fastest planes, but by simple tools used cleverly. An inexpensive direction finder, a rotating antenna, and 3 seconds to get a bearing. That's all it took to make U-boats blind.